pointed at it, called his sales team over to look. 70 years. 80. You drove that here. On purpose. I said, it's a 1945 Farmall. I bought it for $75 last week. Drove it 30 miles to get here. Runs perfectly. And I'm here to make you an offer. More laughter. The whole dealership was watching now. This was apparently the most entertaining thing that had happened all week. Old man with ancient tractor. Comedy gold. You want to trade that museum piece for a real tractor? I'll give you scrap value. Maybe $200 if you haul it to the scrapyard yourself. I said, no trade. I want to show you something. Something inside this engine. Something that'll change how you think about old equipment. 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. Kyle looked at his sales team. They were grinning. Show me what's so special about your $75 tractor. My name is Martin Weber. I'm 78 years old, and I'd just bought something remarkable without knowing it. Old farmer named Raymond Kowalski had died at 93. No family. The tractor had been sitting in his barn for decades, covered in dust. But the sale description said runs, so I took a chance. Too obsolete. Too much work to restore. I bought it because I've always loved old machinery, loved the engineering, loved the history, loved bringing forgotten things back to life. A nice project tractor for $75. Good deal. Then I decided to change the oil. Basic maintenance. First thing you do with any old equipment. Assess what you're working with. Pulled the drain plug, expecting the usual black sludge. Oil came out thick and dark, like molasses. Expected after decades of sitting. Probably hadn't been changed, since the 90s at least. What I didn't expect was what else came out with the oil. Something solid. Something metal. Clinked against the drain pan. Covered completely in oil and grime. I pulled it out. Cleaned it off in my parts washer. A dog tag. A military identification tag. World War II era based on the style. I'd seen enough of them in my life to recognize it immediately. My own father had worn one similar. Different war. Same purpose. Identify the body if the worst happens. Joseph, a serial number. 35,847,291. Blood type. O religion. Catholic. Just like they made them in 1943 and 1944. Standard issue for soldiers shipping overseas. How does a World War II dog tag end up inside a tractor engine? This wasn't accidental. You don't accidentally drop a dog tag inside an engine and not notice. This was intentional. This meant something. I started researching immediately. Found obituaries for Raymond Kowalski, who'd owned the tractor. Died at 93. Unmarried. No children. Farmed the same land his entire adult life. Donated to veteran organizations. Active in the VFW. Quiet man. Born 1925. Enlisted 1943. Army. Sent to Europe. 116th Infantry Regiment. Fought across France through summer and fall of 1944. Killed in action November 18, 1944. Lorraine region, France, age 19. Body recovered. Buried in American Cemetery at St. Vold. The younger brother who'd looked up to him. Who'd wanted to serve like his older brother. Who'd written letters home talking about coming back to farm together. About the life they'd build after the war. About the future they'd share. Raymond came home. Joseph didn't. Had to live with survivor's guilt every farmer, every success, every achievement. The Farmall M was manufactured in 1945, late in the war. Raymond would have been discharged in early 1945, would have come home to the farm his father had left. That question burned in my mind. I kept looking for answers. The oil pan had an access plate. Standard on these old Farmalls makes it easier to clean out sludge without removing the entire pan. Looking for answers. Inside, tucked into a corner, wrapped in oiled cloth that had preserved it for 79 years, was a letter, folded carefully. The cloth was thick with oil, but the letter inside was readable. Ink had faded some, but was still legible. Dated April 15, 1945, Raymond's handwriting. 5 months after Joseph died. Written as if Joseph could still read it. Written as grief finding expression. Written as promise being made. I sat on my shop floor and read it. Read it 3 times before I could fully process what I was holding. This is what it said. Dear Joseph, they sent me home. Said the war's almost over. Said I could come back to the farm. But you won't come home. You won't see the farm anymore. Won't see the land Dad left us. I bought a tractor today. A Farmall M brand new. Cost more than I should spend, but I need it to work the land. To plant crops. To do the farming we were supposed to do together. But you're not here to help me. You're in France. In a cemetery. In the ground so far from home. I can't bring you back. Can't make it right. Can't fix what was broken when you died. Where the power comes from. Where the work happens. You'll be with me every day. Every field I plow. Every crop I plant. Every harvest I bring in. You'll be part of it. Part of the work. We'll be part of every success. Every season. Every year. You'll be in the engine. In the heart. In the machinery that does the work. You won't be forgotten. Won't be left behind. I promise you this. I will never sell this tractor. Will never scrap it. Will never let it go. As long as I live, you'll be part of this farm. Together, even though you're gone. I miss you every day, brother. Every single day. To keep my promise that we'd farm this land together. Your brother always. Raymond. I sat there crying. Crying for brothers separated by war. Crying for promises kept in unusual ways. Crying for love that found expression through machinery. Crying for the human story I'd discovered inside an engine I'd almost dismissed as just another old tractor. This was a promise kept for 79 years. This was Raymond Kowalski farming every day with his brother inside the engine. Keeping Joseph close the only way he knew how. Never breaking the promise. Raymond had farmed for 79 years, had kept that tractor running, had maintained it, had worked with it, had treated it differently than other equipment, not just as machinery, as memorial, as shrine, as the place his brother lived on. That's what I wanted to show Kyle Morrison. The reason some old equipment matters beyond specifications. The reason we should think twice before dismissing something as obsolete or worthless. Had them carefully wrapped in protective plastic? Had photocopies too in case anything happened to the originals. These were historical artifacts now. Irreplaceable. When Kyle laughed, when he called his team over to mock, when he offered scrap value, I stayed calm. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew this wasn't just about an old tractor. About learning that assumptions can be catastrophically wrong. Now, I pulled them out. The letter in its protective sleeve said to Kyle in a voice that made everyone stop laughing. Something that's been inside this engine for 79 years. Something that will change how you understand what you're looking at. Kyle's laughter stopped completely. Something in my voice. Something in my eyes. He called his head mechanic over. They pulled the Farmall into a service bay. Clean white floors. Professional equipment. This tired old tractor looking completely out of place among the gleaming new John Deeres. Frank opened the oil pan access carefully, looked inside with a flashlight. His face changed. Professional skepticism giving way to surprise. I said, "That's Joseph Kowalski's memorial. War II. Raymond bought this tractor and put his brother's dog tag inside the engine, kept him close." I handed Kyle the letter. Watched his expression change from skepticism to understanding to something like shame. He read it twice. As a memorial that had worked for 79 years. As a promise kept across 8 decades. As evidence that old equipment sometimes carries stories worth more than scrap. Kyle was quiet for a long time. Didn't think about history. Didn't think about the story. Didn't think about what it might mean to someone. Obsolete, worthless, and usually that's correct. Usually old is just old. But sometimes it's more. Sometimes it's history. And we lose those stories when we scrap everything that isn't new and shiny. Kyle asked what I planned to do with the tractor. Could restore it privately. Could keep it. Could sell it now that the story was known. Historical significance adds value. This wasn't just a $75 tractor anymore. This was a World War II memorial. Museums would pay. Collectors would pay. Had known from the moment I read Raymond's letter. Had known this wasn't mine to keep or profit from. This belonged to history. Effects Farms. Going to make it look exactly like it did in 1945 when Raymond bought it. Going to make sure Joseph Kowalski isn't just a name on a wall somewhere. And then I'm going to donate it to the County Historical Society. Let them display it. Let them educate people. Let them preserve this story for future generations. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Really understood what this meant, what it taught. He said, "Martin, can I help with the restoration? 30 years of pushing upgrades in technology. Maybe this is a chance to do something different, something that actually matters. Something meaningful beyond commission and sales numbers." I looked at him, saw genuine contrition. Saw someone willing to invest time and money into preserving something that wouldn't profit him at all. Saw the beginning of real change. I said yes. Said I'd be honored to work with him on this. Said it would mean more coming from a dealer. Would have more impact. Would show that even people in the business of selling new can value old when they understand the story. Over the next 6 months, Kyle and I worked together restoring that Farmall. Used his dealership shop, his professional lift equipment, his parts connections, his technical expertise with agricultural machinery, combined with my knowledge of historical accuracy and period-correct restoration techniques. Did it as a community service project. Kyle made it a teaching opportunity for his staff. Brought his sales team into the shop regularly. Made them part of the process. Made them hold Joseph's dog tag. Made them understand that tractors aren't just products. Sometimes they're memorials. Watch them start asking customers different questions. Not just what do you need, but what's the history of your equipment. Started hearing stories. Started learning that old tractors often have memories attached. Started understanding that pushing replacement isn't always the right answer. Started respecting what people already own. We documented everything meticulously. Professional photography of every stage. Photographed the dog tag from every angle. Confirmed Joseph's service record. Confirmed he died exactly when and where records indicated. Confirmed this wasn't a hoax or fabrication. This was real history. Climate-controlled storage. Proper mounting for display. Treated it like the historical document it was. 79 years old. Handwritten. Unique. Irreplaceable. We researched Joseph Kowalski extensively. Found his enlistment records. Found the transport manifest showing when he shipped overseas. Found the unit records showing his participation in D-Day. Found the burial record at St. Ovold American Cemetery. We found references to farming, to coming home, to working the land with Raymond, to the future they'd planned, to the life he thought he'd have. 2 dreams that died in France on a November day in 1944. 1 letter particularly gutted me. We're going to make it something special. We're going to build something that lasts. I can't wait to get home and start. He'd kept his brother close, kept him working, kept him part of everything, kept the promise the only way he could. We matched the original 1945 Farmall M specifications exactly. Paint color from factory records. We wanted it to look exactly as it had when Raymond drove it home from the dealer in April 1945, when he'd put his brother's dog tag inside the engine, when he'd made his promise. Made Joseph's dog tag viewable. Made the story accessible without requiring disassembly. People needed to see it, needed to understand what Raymond had done. Raymond's handwriting clear, his words readable. The local newspaper covered the restoration. Human interest story. The story of a promise kept through machinery. Then international. The story went viral in ways we never anticipated. People were fascinated, moved, touched by the idea that love could be preserved inside an engine. That grief could find expression through machinery. With farmers who understood the connection between land and legacy, with anyone who'd ever loved someone and lost them. We received letters from across the country, from families with similar stories, from people who'd hidden memorials in unusual places, from veterans who understood Raymond's need to keep his brother close. 1 letter came from a veteran of Iraq. He wrote, "I came home. I understand why it mattered. I understand keeping promises to the dead. Thank you for showing that we're not the only ones who needed to keep them close." That letter made me cry. Made us understand the universality of what we were preserving. This wasn't just one brother's story. How we keep promises when keeping them seems impossible. 6 months of learning. The dedication ceremony drew over 300 people, more than we'd anticipated. Veterans organizations showed up in force. VFW, American Legion. Veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, men and women who'd served. For history, the farming community came. Old farmers who'd known Raymond, who'd bought equipment from the same dealer in the same era, who remembered when Farmall Ms. were new, who'd farmed alongside Raymond for decades without knowing the story, without knowing what he carried, without knowing the promise he kept every day in the fields. Families came, brought children, brought grandchildren, wanted them to see, wanted them to understand. Is the ways we cope with grief, is the promises we keep even when nobody's watching. Media came. Local TV, regional newspapers, military history, documentaries. Everyone wanting to tell the story. Everyone understanding this was significant. This mattered beyond one tractor. Stood in front of everyone, in front of his competitors, in front of his customers, in front of his community. Just honest acknowledgement. I saw old equipment and assumed obsolete, assumed worthless, assumed only good for recycling. I was completely wrong, and being wrong taught me more than being right ever has. About understanding for the first time in 30 years of selling equipment that tractors can mean more than specifications. Can carry stories worth preserving. Can be memorials worth honoring. Can be promises worth keeping. He talked about changing his dealership, about helping people restore old tractors instead of just pushing replacement. I was humbled by what I found inside the engine, not because it was mechanically valuable, because it was historically significant, because it was emotionally profound, because it taught me that my assumptions were destroying stories worth preserving, that my career had been built on dismissing things that mattered, that I needed to change. This tractor changed me. Then he did something powerful. He apologized, publicly, to everyone who'd ever been told their old equipment was worthless, to every farmer who'd been pushed to buy new when old would have worked, to every family whose history he'd dismissed as obsolete. The museum display is beautiful. The Farmall sits in a place of honor. Plaques tell Joseph and Raymond's story. Display case shows the dog tag and preserved letter, photos of both brothers, Joseph's service record, Raymond's farming history, the story complete and preserved. Visitors can activate a video, watch the engine running, part of the machinery that fed communities, part of the legacy his brother built, each worth preserving for reasons beyond monetary value. Kyle changed how his dealership operates, helps people restore old tractors, provides parts and expertise, treats old equipment with respect instead of dismissal. About understanding that new isn't always better and old isn't always worthless. About the story that changed how he sees his industry. Other dealers have followed his example. Started honoring history. Started understanding that agricultural equipment isn't just commerce. It's culture. It's memory. It's how families remember. It's how promises are kept. I'm 84 now. 6 years since I bought that Farmall for $75. 6 years since I found Joseph Kowalski's memorial. 6 years since I taught a John Deere dealer about humility and history. People come from other states, other countries, all to see the tractor with the memorial inside. All to understand that love takes unexpected forms, that grief finds unusual expressions, that promises can be kept through machinery. I visit monthly. Stand in front of that tractor. Think about Raymond Kowalski farming for 79 years with his brother inside the engine. Working the land they were supposed to work together. That's the kind of story we lose when we see old equipment as just old. When we value only the new. When we assume obsolete means worthless. Kyle learned that. Through laughter that became shame, that became understanding, that became action. The John Deere dealer laughed at my old Farmall. What he found inside the engine shocked him. Not because it was valuable, because it was sacred. Put him inside the heart of a tractor, made him part of the work, part of the dream, part of the legacy. That's what old equipment sometimes carries. That's what we lose when we scrap everything. That's what history looks like when it's preserved inside machinery instead of museums. That's what a $75 tractor taught a dealer about humility, about history, about the stories we destroy when we only see metal and assume obsolete means worthless. Some things are priceless, even when they cost $75, even when dealers laugh, even when everyone assumes they're junk. Sometimes the most valuable discoveries are hidden inside the engines we're too quick to dismiss. Sometimes history weighs more than horsepower matters. Raymond's promise was kept. The memorial works no longer, but teaches instead. And a dealer learned to look deeper, to ask questions, to understand that laughter is sometimes ignorance meeting significance. What it taught, what it changed, that's the story. That's the lesson. That's why some old equipment matters more than specifications suggest. That's why I bought a $75 Farmall. That's why it changed everything. Not because of what it was, because of what it carried, what it preserved, what it taught everyone who stopped laughing long enough to understand.